Well, welcome back, everybody. A lot to break down after a powerful closing by the defense in the Brooke Skylar Richardson courtroom, where they broke down all of the points of reasonable doubt and showing the strong likelihood that this was a stillborn. The prosecution responded in kind with their rebuttal, showing how the defendant never wanted the baby, was happy when Annabelle died, the fact that we can't do a proper analysis of what the cause of death is because of Richardson, because she buried the baby. It's her fault that we don't know. And how it's possible she burned Annabelle even if the bones aren't charred. But then finally, the prosecutor made this point that she shouldn't have given birth alone. She should have gotten help. So there's a lot to break down from what we saw this morning. Joining me once again is attorney Terry Austin, but I'm also joined here by criminal defense attorney Eklund Mercy. Great to have you both. Eklund, I'll start with you. Okay, so I know you saw the tail end of the defense. Let me get your perspective on the prosecution with their closing, because they went through a lot.
What? They broke it all the way down. They anticipated all the arguments and they made a strong case. They didn't use any of the compromised evidence. So they didn't use her confession. They didn't use, the bullying tactics that were used during questioning. They just broke it down. He did an excellent job. He started from start to finish, even broke down the circumstantial and the direct evidence and how they should be given equal weight. He demolished their expert with just simple comparisons. How he changed from family issues with family members to issues with people in authority. But what really he was consistent with was the evidence that was just concrete in that text message saying how literally excited I am about getting my belly back. And that was a consistent theme. He really hammered in on it. He really put it in. And then towards the end, at the very least, if you can't find that she murdered this baby, it's at least a manslaughter. I think he did an excellent job of really summarizing the case, because at first the state gave us some ideas of what they were going to prove, but we really I don't think the jury really had a full story of what they were trying to really hammer in on. And I think he did a really great, excellent summation.
Well, I got to tell you, I mean, they're hitting her with a lot, not just aggravated murder, but manslaughter and child endangerment, and also the abuse of a corpse. Now, Terry, one of the things that he echoed is something that I said throughout the course of this case, that the defense has been raising amazing reasonable doubt arguments. I mean, that defense closing was so strong. We talked about it earlier. But again, if you have the evidence and you believe she never wanted the baby and she never planned for the baby, isn't it just so coincidental? And as he said, the stars have to align that just by pure luck, the baby is a stillborn. So what do you think of his closing in relation to what we heard from Charles Riggers, the defense attorney for Skylar Richardson?
Well, I agree to a certain extent with Eklund. I do think that the prosecution did a nice job here. I still think overall that the defense did a better summation. And Jesse, you're absolutely right. We talked about this before. Was it just luck that the stars all lined up, that she had a stillborn? And I think that was an excellent point. In the beginning of the prosecution summation, I thought he was a little bit slow. I thought he was raising issues that really didn't hit home. He said that, Skylar didn't know about what the timing was for her birth. I think it's clear that she was a little bit confused. She thought she had more time. So those types of points, I don't think he did very well. But when he went through the checklist, and when he talked about the neonaticide, and when he talked about the fact that this could be manslaughter, even if it's not murder, those three things he did at the end of the summation, and I think they were very powerful. And so all in all, if that's the last thing the jury is hearing, I think that might have some impact on their final decision here.
Well, it was fascinating to listen to both sides. It was also fascinating to see the reactions from other people in the courtroom. We saw Skylar's parents, who seemed to be just distraught. But then you also saw the defendant herself shaking her head at certain points during the prosecution's closing, seeming to suggest to me that she was disagreeing with what he was saying and how he was characterizing her. All right, everybody, we are officially in verdict watch. That means the jury in that courtroom, the Brooke Skylar Richardson courtroom, they have gone to deliberate. It's a question of when will they come back? When will we get an answer? Now, let's talk about what we can expect here. So, Eklund, I got to ask, do you expect a verdict today? Do you expect questions from the jury today? What can we look out for? Because I know it's unpredictable, but sometimes certain cases we have a sense, other times we don't. What do you think here?
I think they're definitely going to ask a few questions, just based on the charges. Just based on the indictment and the levels of and the different. We have aggravated murder, and then we have involuntary manslaughter, and then we have endangering a child. So we just have different levels. So I do suspect that some questions may be asked, but this is going to be a tough one. I don't think that they'll be able to come up with a verdict today.
See, I've also been of the opinion that I wouldn't be surprised if I saw a mistrial on at least some of the hung jury on some of the counts here. And, Terry, one of them where I think they might not have an issue is the abuse of a corpse charge. Just to let our viewers know what that is, it basically says no person shall treat a human corpse in a way that would outrage reasonable community sensibilities. Terry, we heard the defense attorney in the closing talk about this and said that, what is reasonable community sensibilities? Yes, there's outrage, but there's outrage because of a false narrative that was put forward. People thought that she burned her baby alive, and he was trying to say that you have to consider that count carefully. What do you make of that count?
I think that the defense has a good argument here. I mean, Skylar buried the baby, yes. She didn't burn the baby, and experts on both sides are pretty convincing that there was no burning here. And I think for the defense to point out the fact that prosecution kept harping on that, even though there's no evidence, was really a good tactic. The fact that she buried the baby in her own backyard, not far away from her home, she can see this burial ground every single day out her window. Now, we talked about the fact, and the prosecution raised this, that the baby wasn't wrapped in a blanket. And I think that does go against the defense's argument. But all in all, I think that the outrage to how the corpse was handled is not going to reach that verdict. I think the jury's going to think that, it wasn't outrageous what she did. She didn't, bury the child in a graveyard, but she did take care of the corpse. She didn't burn the corpse. So it's a difficult case, Jesse.
Another way the prosecution said she buried that baby without even a blanket, and that's another way of looking. And Eklund, let me ask you this. There's another part of it where she is charged with these different crimes, and the prosecution made the point, we don't have evidence of the cause of death. We don't have this forensic evidence because of her. Because of her burying the baby. And yes, the tampering with evidence charge has been thrown out. It's been thrown out, but the abuse of the corpse charge is still on there. But the reason we don't have so much of an answer about what happened to Annabelle is because it's the defendant's fault. How is that going to factor into the jury's analysis?
It's going to be a major factor. The reason why we don't know, there's a way that Brooke wouldn't have been in this situation if indeed the child was stillborn, if she followed the proper protocol, which is to call 911. We would have had an autopsy. We would have had a, proper burial. There was no reason for her, if there was a stillborn, there was no reason for her to keep concealing it. And I think that's what the prosecution really hammered on. And the only reason why we don't know what actually happened is because she buried it without, even if she had a blanket, I think there would be a little bit more evidence, substantial evidence to really prove if the baby was stillborn. But we don't have that because she just buried the child in the ground. So I don't think, even though I understand what my co-counsel is saying, that, hey, she buried it in the backyard, but even a puppy deserves a blanket, or something like that. She just put dirt on top of her child, and that really goes back to the state's argument in which that she really never connected with that child or never even expected that child to live. So I think that that's very important. I think that the jury is going to see that. I do believe that burying a child without a covering, without a coffin, without any type of covering, I think that does affect people's sensibilities.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. So many different facts in this case. Let's take a break. When we come back, more to break down. Stay tuned.